Lena had always thought her life was ordinary until the accident. The memories before were a blur, like a faded photograph slowly deteriorating with time. She couldn't remember who she was before the crash, and the doctors had told her it was normal. Traumatic events like that often erase parts of the mind, they said. But Lena felt that there was something more to it. Something was missing. Something was wrong. It had been years since the accident, and she had tried to move on. But lately, strange things had been happening. Unsettling dreams, whispers that echoed in the corners of her mind, and a constant feeling that someone was watching her, as if her life was a script written by someone else, and she was merely following the lines. One evening, while going through some old family albums in the attic, Lena stumbled upon a picture she didn't remember. There she was, smiling with a group of people she didn't recognize. But what caught her attention most was the date on the back, July 17th, 2017, the date of the accident. But the people in the picture, they didn't look like strangers. Something about their eyes, the way they stared back at her, unsettled her. One face in particular stood out. A man, his face half hidden in the shadows, but his eyes, they were too familiar. "Why can't I remember you?" Lena whispered, her fingers tracing the photo. That night, her dreams were filled with images of that man. His voice haunted her, whispering things she couldn't understand, his face a blur yet oddly familiar. Each time she reached a memory, it slipped through her fingers like sand. The following day, she decided to visit the place where the photo was taken, a small, abandoned cabin on the outskirts of town. It was the last location that she remembered visiting before the crash, but her mind had blocked it out. She had no idea why. The cabin stood at the edge of the woods, its wooden walls weathered by time and the elements. Lena could feel the cold air around it, even though it was a warm day. She approached slowly, her footsteps heavy, as if the earth itself was reluctant to let her pass. The door creaked open, and she stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of decay lingered in the corners. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The furniture was old, broken, and covered with sheets, but one thing stood out: a mirror. It hung crookedly on the wall, its frame tarnished, reflecting nothing but darkness. But as Lena walked closer, something in the reflection caught her eye. It was her. But not just her. There was someone standing behind her, a shadowy figure. The same man from the photo. Lena froze. Her heart pounded in her chest. She turned around quickly, expecting to see someone standing behind her, but there was nothing, just the empty room. "Get out!" A voice hissed from the darkness. It wasn't the man's voice, but it was close. Too close. Lena stumbled back, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She had to leave. She had to get away from this place. But as she turned to run, she saw something in the mirror again. This time, it was not just a man. There were more faces, their expressions twisted in agony, their eyes pleading. They were trapped. The forgotten truth. Lena couldn't leave. Something had pulled her back. The mirror, its reflection, held her captive in ways she couldn't explain. Her feet moved on their own, bringing her closer to the mirror. She reached out, her hand trembling, and as her fingers brushed the surface, a rush of images flooded her mind. A flash of light, screams, a car crash. The man, his eyes, the same eyes she had seen in the photo, staring at her with an expression of desperation. He was trying to tell her something. He was trying to warn her, but the warning came too late. The next thing Lena knew, she was lying on the cold floor, gasping for air. Her head spun, and the world around her seemed to spin too. She was back in the cabin, but the walls were different now. There was blood on the floor. The mirror was shattered, and the faces of the people in the photo were no longer trapped. They were free, but not all of them. The man stood in front of her, his eyes hollow, his mouth open in a silent scream. He reached out, and Lena could feel his cold fingers touch her arm. "You shouldn't have come here," he whispered, his voice distant, as if it wasn't coming from him, but from everywhere at once. "The truth, it's too much for you to bear." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The accident, the memory loss, the strange feeling of being watched. It wasn't an accident. It was all connected. Lena had been part of something much darker, and the man in the mirror had been trying to protect her from it. But the protection came with a price. "You never left," he whispered, his voice breaking. "None of you did." The revelation. Mark's heart raced as he felt his courage slowly drain away. He pushed the blanket aside, attempting to focus on the empty bed, but when his eyes fell on the bloodstains, he froze. It was as if something violent had taken place there. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and a shadow entered the room. "You shouldn't have come here, Mark." The voice echoed, deep and ominous. Mark's eyes locked on the figure in front of him, but there was no pity in its gaze, just a cold truth. He realized the figure wasn't just some ghost. It was his past, the memories he had tried to bury. "Are you with me?" Mark whispered, his voice shaking. "Yes, your past will always be with you, Mark. You can't escape your greatest mistake." The shadow moved closer, its words cutting through the air. Mark's heart pounded in his chest. The truth had come crashing down on him, and he could do nothing but face it. His body froze in terror as the figure advanced toward him. The hospital's secret. Mark tried to move, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. It was as if the walls of the hospital were closing in on him, trapping him in a nightmare he couldn't escape. The door slammed shut behind him as he rushed toward it. Panic flooded his veins as he realized he couldn't escape. He turned to face the shadow, which was now only a few feet away. "You'll never leave this place, Mark," the shadow whispered. The atmosphere grew heavier, and Mark could almost feel the hospital itself breathing, alive with the weight of countless lost souls. He felt as though the walls were closing in, tightening around him as he stepped deeper into his own psychological prison. Suddenly, a strange light appeared in the distance, casting an eerie glow across the darkened room. Mark cautiously moved towards it, his every step heavy with dread. "You've forgotten everything." The voice came again, faint but persistent. Mark hesitated for a moment, but then, in a moment of sheer determination, he reached out towards the light. The instant his fingers brushed against it, the light vanished, and before him stood the final truth, the final decision. Mark stood there, heart racing, as the truth he had been running from for years now stood before him. This hospital wasn't just a physical place. It was a manifestation of his fears and regrets. The darkness he felt had been growing inside him all along, a reminder of the guilt and the decisions he had buried deep within. "You can't forgive yourself, Mark. You don't have the strength to face your past." The shadow spoke one last time. Mark's eyes closed, and he gathered every ounce of strength he had left. He had been running for too long, trying to avoid confronting his demons. But now, there was no escaping. He knew what he had to do. In that moment, Mark understood that facing his past, his mistakes and regrets, was the only way to truly be free. The hospital, the shadows, and everything else faded away, leaving him with nothing but the truth. The end. Mark's physical form still lay in the hospital, but his mind had finally broken free. He had faced his past, his fears, and his deepest regrets. In that moment, he was no longer a prisoner of his own mind. "This isn't the hospital," the shadow's voice echoed in his mind. "This is your inner struggle." Mark had fought a battle within himself, and while his body remained in the same place, his soul was finally free. He had come to understand the truth, that facing our deepest fears is the only way to overcome them. His journey had ended, but his story would live on in the shadows of his past. Adam had never been one to believe in the paranormal, but nothing in his life could have prepared him for what awaited him at St. Lazarus Hospital. It was an old, seemingly abandoned building on the outskirts of the city, known for its dark past. Locals whispered about the haunted halls, strange noises, and inexplicable disappearances. Adam, a young investigative journalist, was determined to uncover the truth. Armed with nothing but his camera and a flashlight, he made his way inside. The air was thick with dust, and the musty smell of decay filled his nostrils. It was eerily silent, except for the sound of his footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. As he ventured deeper into the hospital, the temperature began to drop. Goosebumps covered his arms, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He tried to shake off the feeling of being watched, but every step he took only intensified the sensation. He entered a room labeled Patient Room 13. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit space. It was eerily still, with an old hospital bed in the center. But what caught his attention was a figure lying on the bed, a patient, lifeless, and still. Adam approached cautiously, his camera ready to capture anything unusual. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Adam blinked, and when he opened his eyes again, the figure on the bed was no longer still. It sat up, its eyes wide open, staring directly at him. Adam froze in fear. He reached for his camera, but his hand trembled too much to get a clear shot. The figure in the bed moved, and a chilling whisper filled the room. "You're not supposed to be here." Adam backed away slowly, his heart racing. The room seemed to close in on him, and the air became thick with a strange, oppressive energy. The figure on the bed was still staring at him, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Who are you?" Adam stammered, his voice barely a whisper. The figure did not answer, but its eyes seemed to say everything. The silence in the room was deafening, and Adam could feel his pulse thumping in his ears. He quickly turned and rushed to the door, but just as he reached for the handle, it slammed shut. Adam stumbled back in shock, his breath coming in quick, panicked gasps. He turned back to face the room. The figure was now standing at the foot of the bed, its eyes fixed on him. It moved toward him, its footsteps unnaturally slow and deliberate. Adam tried to run, but his legs felt like lead. His body was paralyzed with fear. The figure spoke again, its voice cold and hollow. "You shouldn't have come here. This place, it never lets anyone leave." Adam could feel his heart beat in his throat as the figure came closer. His mind raced, trying to understand what was happening. Was this a ghost? A spirit? Or was it something even worse? He needed to get out, but no matter where he turned, the door remained shut. His flashlight flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. Adam fumbled with the flashlight, trying to turn it back on. When he finally succeeded, the figure was gone, but the room had changed. It no longer looked like the hospital room he had entered. The walls were covered in blood, the bed was overturned, and the air was thick with the scent of death. Adam's camera lay on the floor, its lens cracked. As he reached for it, he noticed something on the wall. Words written in what appeared to be blood. "You're not alone here. The hospital is alive." Adam's blood ran cold as he read the words on the wall. He was no longer in the hospital he had entered. He had stepped into a nightmare, and he was trapped. His mind raced as he tried to find a way out, but every door he tried was locked. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, and every turn he took only brought him deeper into the hospital's maze-like corridors. His flashlight flickered again, and in the distance he could hear footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing off the walls. He turned toward the sound, but saw nothing. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Hello?" he called, his voice trembling. No answer came, but the footsteps grew louder. They were getting closer. Adam turned and ran, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the footsteps behind him, but every time he glanced over his shoulder, no one was there. The hospital seemed to be alive, shifting and changing around him. He stumbled into a small room and slammed the door shut behind him. It was pitch black, but he could feel something in the room with him, something watching him. His flashlight flickered one last time, and for a brief moment he saw it. Standing in the corner of the room, its eyes glowing in the dark, the figure stepped forward, its features becoming clearer. It was a woman, pale and gaunt, her skin stretched tight over her bones. Her eyes were wide open, and her mouth moved as if to speak, but no sound came out. Adam backed away, but the figure advanced toward him. The air grew colder, and he could see his breath forming in the freezing air. He reached for the door handle, but before he could open it, the figure was right in front of him. "You'll stay here forever," it whispered. Adam's world went black. The silent witness. Ethan had never been one to believe in the paranormal. A young and talented investigative officer, he had always dismissed the ghost stories that people told about the old Riverside Manor. However, when a case led him to the manor, he couldn't ignore the strange unease that began to settle over him. The manor, abandoned for 3 decades, stood on a hillside on the outskirts of the city. Once a magnificent home, it was now nothing more than a crumbling structure, its windows shattered. its doors eerily ajar, and vines creeping up its walls like silent witnesses to a forgotten past. Ethan's task was simple: solve the case of a missing person. A young woman, Layla, had vanished 2 weeks ago after entering the manor. The authorities had closed the case, deeming the manor an old, abandoned place. But something about it troubled Ethan. There was something about the house he needed to uncover. As he stepped inside, the door creaked loudly, as if protesting his arrival. The air inside was thick with dust, and the musty smell of decay filled his nostrils. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of his footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. The mysterious voices. Ethan moved deeper into the manor, his heart racing. The further he went, the colder it became. The shadows seemed to grow longer, and every creak of the floorboards underfoot made him more aware of the emptiness surrounding him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Then, suddenly, he heard it, a laugh, soft and eerie, coming from one of the darkened windows. Ethan froze, his heartbeat picking up speed. It was the last thing he expected to hear in such a place. "Why are you here?" a voice whispered, and Ethan's blood ran cold. He quickly glanced around, trying to locate the source, but there was no one in sight. His flashlight flickered, and he felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He moved forward cautiously, pushing through the growing sense of dread. As he entered a room, a picture on the wall caught his eye, a photograph of a young woman, her eyes hollow, her expression sorrowful. Layla, the very person he was searching for. She seemed to be staring directly at him, as if pleading for help. Just then, the curtains fluttered, and a cold gust of wind blew through the room. The atmosphere shifted dramatically, and a strange, ghostly whisper filled the space. "I'm here. Help me." Ethan turned to face the corner where the sound had come from, and there in the dim light, he saw it, a figure translucent and pale, standing silently. The sad truth. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He didn't know if the figure was real, but the chill in the air was undeniable. He moved toward it, his hands trembling. The figure, a woman in an old-fashioned dress, raised her head slowly to meet his gaze. Who are you?" Ethan stammered, but the figure did not respond. Instead, it pointed to a nearby desk where an old, tattered piece of paper lay. Ethan approached it cautiously and picked it up. It was a note, scrawled in a shaky hand. "Let me go. This place won't let me leave." The air around him thickened, and the walls of the room seemed to close in on him. His flashlight flickered one last time before dying, leaving him in complete darkness. He fumbled with it, desperate to turn it back on. When the light finally returned, the figure was gone, but the room had changed. The walls were now covered in stains that looked like blood, the furniture overturned, and the room reeked of death. Ethan's camera lay on the floor, its lens cracked. As he reached down to pick it up, something caught his eye on the wall. Words written in what appeared to be blood. "You're not alone here. The house is alive." The depths of the secret. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he read the words on the wall. This wasn't just an abandoned manor. It was something much more sinister. He quickly moved to investigate further, determined to uncover the truth behind the house's disturbing power. But as he tried each door, they were all locked. The house seemed to stretch endlessly, its halls twisting in every direction. Then in the distance, he heard footsteps, slow and deliberate. Ethan turned toward the sound, but saw nothing. His breath quickened, his chest tight with anxiety. The footsteps grew louder, coming closer, though he could see no one. "Hello?" Ethan called out, his voice trembling. No answer came, but the footsteps didn't stop. He turned and ran, his heart racing in his chest. He could still hear the footsteps behind him, but each time he looked back, the hallways remained empty. The house was alive, shifting around him, trapping him inside. Finally, Ethan stumbled into a small room and slammed the door shut behind him. It was pitch black, but he could feel something else in the room with him, a presence that wasn't human. His flashlight flickered, and for just a moment he saw it. Standing in the corner of the room, its eyes glowing in the dark, the figure stepped forward, revealing its full form. A woman, pale and gaunt, her skin stretched tight over her bones. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Ethan backed away, but the figure advanced toward him. The temperature dropped, and he could see his breath in the freezing air. He reached for the door handle, but before he could open it, the figure was right in front of him. "You will stay here forever," it whispered. The world went black. The decision. Ethan's mind raced. The house was not just haunted. It was a living entity, and he had become its prey. He knew his only choice was to confront the house and its dark secrets head-on, but he was trapped. There was no escape. He faced the figure, and with a burst of courage, he made a decision. To uncover the truth, he would have to let go of his fear, face his past, and let the house show him what had been hiding all these years. Ethan gathered all his strength and prepared himself for the final confrontation with the house, one that would change everything. Ethan had finally unraveled the house's dark secret. In doing so, he had unlocked the truth about his own past. The manor had trapped many before him, but now he knew its power. He had been a part of its story all along.